My friends, in the event that you are new to this wonderful card game and you have not yet signed up for a UGN Play account, you can now sign up with my exclusive referral code Alliteration and get yourself 50 bonus loyalty points for free, as well as additional loyalty points for every event that you play in within my referral code period. Why do you need these, you might ask? Well, loyalty points can be used to redeem free promotional cards in the mail, as well as other exclusive items coming in the future. The bonus points from using my code are enough to redeem almost any promo card right off the bat, and having your UGN account is going to allow you to accrue and track more and more as you go through your hero or villain's journey. If free cards and progression all sound super appealing to you, the links for all of this are going to be in the description below. Now, let's get on to the video. Hey there, partner. I heard you like bad decks. Howdy my friends, and welcome to another Alliteration gaming video. My name's Levi, and today we've got another part of our How to Crush Nationals and Get to Worlds mini-series, The Good, the Bad, and the Aggro. So if you haven't seen the previous installment in this series, this of course is going to be a 3-part video series where we're going over 3 categories of decks. There's going to be 5 decks in each category, 15 total, and collectively they are going to be the 15 decks that I think you need to be aware of and be ready to play against at Nationals. These will by no means be the only decks I think will show up, nor do I think they're the only decks that I think can top, but I think they are the 15 you're most likely to encounter who are most likely to show up in some solid quantity and that you do need to be ready to fight against. The 3 categories are all going to have their own unique criteria that denotes what 5 decks are going to be in them. So if you don't see your favorite in this video or one of the other ones, might be in one you have not seen yet. Of course, if you haven't seen the other videos, for all of them that are actually out right now, depending on when you're watching this, I will have them linked in the description below so you can check out the entirety of the list. But with all of those pleasantries and explanations out the way, let's get right into what this video is about. And this, of course, as the title has probably already clued you in on, is going to be the video of the bad decks. So what do I mean when I say the bad decks? I don't mean actually decks that are not good, that are straight up bad. I simply mean the rogue decks. These are going to be characters that at surface level don't seem like anything too crazy to write home about, but once you sit across a very experienced pilot of these decks who has a lot of experience and knowledge about them on their hand, they might just seem unbeatable if you are prepared to go against them. So that's why we're here today. You are now going to the Pro Hero Nationals, where only the best of the best will be competing their hearts out, and you can best believe that there's going to be some very skilled and dedicated pilots sitting behind some of these characters in this tournament. These are characters that if you are not prepared to face them, have a ton of potential to just completely steamroll you no matter what you're playing, be it meta or off meta. The other angle of these decks is the primary definition of a rogue deck in general, simply meaning that it has really good matchups against some of the meta decks. The major difference in this category compared to the other two is the other two are more about how the deck functions and operates as a whole, whereas the decks in this category are more classified by their presence, not so much as whether they're more aggro or blitzkrieg or defensive and reliable. These decks, playstyle aside, are going to be in this category simply because of the smaller quantities I think we'll see them in and the unique positions they have to take on some of the more meta decks. This was probably the hardest of the 3 groups of decks to categorize, simply because there are so many like really solid rogue characters in this game that I know someone out there has put countless hours into and is going to be ready to try and take them to a top cut spot. But I really didn't want to break my rules, so I somehow was able to limit it to only 5 characters, and let's get right into them. Coming into the number 5 slot is Recovery Girl. This was the hardest slot in the entire list to categorize because it was either going to be this character or it was going to be Midnight, because I think Midnight's ultra rare puts her in a really interesting spot to take on the meta. Being able to commit your rival's character is very strong. So a special shout out to Midnight. I just don't think that the deck is going to particularly show up as much. Additionally, I think she's probably going to be sideboarded as an answer to decks like that with her ultra rare a lot more than she will get played herself. But enough of that, let's actually get to the character who did make it into the slot. Recovery Girl has had a very interesting journey. When this character was first revealed, pretty much everyone under the sun clamored and screamed for her to get changed, get nerfed, to get eroded pre-existence, and that she was just going to get banned ASAP. Of course, she only just recently became legal as a provisional promo from the most recent season, so despite that reveal being a very long time ago and that riot, we haven't actually seen her get the chance to perform in anything yet. So why is this character on this list? Well, Recovery Girl is a very unique character in that she has extremely debilitating matchups, either skewered towards her advantage or the opponent's advantage. She is a character that some decks can kind of just walk all over, but she's also a character that some decks actually just cannot kill. And that's kind of the main reason I wanted to put her on this list, to kind of spread awareness about the potency of this character. Now, if you're one of the Tokoyamis or the Jiros of this world who just pile a million damage on every attack and are not worried about poking this character in the slightest, if you can do 30 in one turn really consistently, this character is not something you have to be super aware of. But if you're one of those more mid-range decks that spreads their damage out a lot more and wants to have some poke turns to set up their game plan, this character is going to be something you have to have on your radar. The majority of the time, if you are playing into this character and you cannot do the full 30 in one turn, you have to really decide, is it worth attacking her? Do I do like my 6 or 7 now, let her build in all of these things that she needs to advance her game state, and then will I be able to finish her off before it all gets healed back over the next course of turns? Because if you poke this character for 6 damage and then you build for 3 turns, you actually didn't poke this character for 6 damage. There are a lot of things to keep in mind when you're playing against this character. You have to constantly keep an eye on the discard pile to know whether or not you can go in or not. Maybe you think you have 30, then you realize there's some passing the torches and some releases on board. You should be able to build those in, draw a bunch of cards, or maybe there's rigorous training and self-sacrifices on board, and she's be able to build those in and heal and then destroy those things throughout your chain and then take more damage, rebuild them in, reset her rigorous trainings, reset passing the torches to just draw more and more cards. This character plays with their stage as if it's a second and a third hand simultaneously, and it's extremely obnoxious under certain scenarios. If you've ever fought a Recovery Girl player who actually knows what they're doing, you definitely know exactly what I'm talking about here. Watching them constantly manipulate their board state to then manipulate their health and just put you in a position where you cannot finish them off and also are not in a good position to stop their aggression next turn as well is very debilitating. The character also at first glance comes across as someone you can really disrespect because they're just a 5-hand size character that doesn't have any actual like aggro on their face. But the second they get all of their passing the torches on board and like 2 or 3 carbo loadings, and suddenly they're drawing a million cards and everything has X damage and everything's a throw, and they're recurring things like electromagnetic stomps and meteor showers, it's actually very surprising how quickly this character can just murder you once they have their stage set up, which if you go in on them, they're going to get set up. I think there are some characters and decks out there that simply put, the way they are built by default, cannot kill this character, and you've got to just be really prepared for that matchup, and you should have things in your sideboard that are there to go against her. You know, certain decks can side characters like No More Shigaraki, right? Characters that really punish your opponent for wanting to take any kind of hit, right? Everything is just like 10 damage on those guys. Regardless of how you want to figure out going about it, you need to have a plan for this character if your deck is not already in an advantageous position against her, or you at least need to be aware of her and how to play against her as well. Recovery Girl is one I will not be surprised to see show up in some minor quantity with some very dedicated players behind, and I could easily see her sneaking her way into the top cuts. Coming in at number 4 on our list is Shigaraki Tomura. Now this character has had a pretty tumultuous history. In set 1, they showed up all the time in these big quantities, but never really got the chance to do anything. It was more just kind of like people liked playing the character a lot, but he never really made any kind of splash into the format. And then in set 2, he started to creep up more and more, finding his way into a couple top cut positions, and showing that with the proper support under his belt, he shouldn't be written off so easily. And now in set 3, I think the card pool has grown in such an interesting and extraordinary way to really make Shigaraki an incredibly real and potent deck. Him now having access to so many moves that can pump crazy amounts of speed, and then things like Villainous Waylay to just rip your hand apart and really ensure his burn damage getting through is extremely powerful. Furthermore, I think things like Face Shield and Wall Cling decks have taken a little bit of a back seat into this meta, which really just gives him so much more room to breathe. Something we used to say way back in the day was never to attack Shigaraki on turn 2, because if he just like evil gazes and then perfect blocks you and then you lose 2 foundations, you just get put in such a bad spot for him to really turn the tides on you. He's got access to so many new good cards that benefit him both aggressively and defensively that you really like, he's not a character you could go into without a plan anymore. The second you see your rival turn over this guy, you have to alter your entire game plan to it. I also think that Shigaraki just has a good matchup into some of the more meta characters, especially against Kirishima too, right? He wants to take half damage rounded down with his face. Go ahead, buddy, take another 5 thrive while you're at it. I think that he's very much someone that needs to be on your radar, especially if you don't have an already favored matchup into him. You should get some experience against this guy under your belt and really learn what his deck is capable of doing, because Heroes Clash has really changed the tide of what he's capable of. Next on our list, we have one of the most classic rogue decks to have ever rogued, and that is of course Hanta Cero 1-Dot. This guy is so strong. Cero has always been, in my opinion, a really high tier solid character. It just takes a really good pilot and kind of the right format and matchups as well for him to really shine. He kind of has the same treatment as Shigaraki, where Heroes Clash has given him so many crazy new outlets to build. The really big advent he's gotten from the set 3 card pool is of course all of the discard cards. You can build so many variants of Void discard now with things like Villainous Waylay, Somnambulism, Blood Moon Rending. There's so many ways for you to take Cero's once per game and say, actually, I'm gonna do this like every single turn, maybe even more than that if I really feel like it. I think hand control is a really strong archetype right now, and Cero is one of the guys who plays it best. Cero is a very skill-based matchup as well. The skill of the Cero pilot is always going to be at a very determining factor in who takes the round, but the skill on how his rival deals with him is also extremely relevant. The impact that it can have when you can successfully predict how your Cero rival is going to be changing his zones and what he thinks you're going to be holding on to, there's a lot of different mind games and a lot of back and forth in it, sideboarding outs to things he's doing, such as wall clings and spookies to try and circumvent the value of his tape swing plays and other things that are very notable for being in his deck. It's very important to know when and when you cannot afford to half block him. Spoiler alert, the question is almost never. You can almost never let this guy draw 2 cards. And it's also very important to know that when you go in against him, if he's got his once per game still up, you need to be very prepared to be able to continue down your kill string or stop, even with your best card getting ripped out of your hand. Overall, Cero is just an incredibly solid character, and he's one of those guys that I think should absolutely be on your radar, because there are some very dedicated and skilled Cero players out there, and I think they're going to be showing up to nationals in spades. And he is just one of those characters that if you do not have a game plan for, have experience against, and know what you're doing when you're fighting him, is just going to dumpster you. Now, speaking of characters that if you don't know what you're playing against are going to completely dumpster you, we have probably the biggest poster child in that there in our second place spot for Minoru Mineta 2. Mineta is another character that upon initial testing for set 2 had everyone really thinking that he was going to be one of the most dominant forces in the meta. And then slowly as the format continued, he fell off and he fell off and he fell off, and now he barely just shows up here and there. So why should you be aware of Mineta? Well, Mineta is a character that if you run into him too early without a plan, he will literally walk all over you. It will feel like you cannot even play the game. If you have a bad build on turn 1, you swing it to him turn 2, he debuilds you 1, stuffs your pool, he flips sticky balls, stuffs your pool, now you can't even build, and now he's just going to get to beat the snot out of you on the next turn, or just build and advance so far beyond your game state that you'll never be able to catch up. He might not come across as very intimidating as just a 5-hand size character with no real aggro abilities, but it can be deceiving. I mean, debuilding you 1 on his turn essentially says +1 speed to all his moves. It makes things like his tongue whips just more and more potent. This guy has just got a lot of really cool tactics available. Additionally, if your deck is very reliant on things like combo attacks, you need to be ready to play around him, because the second that he stuffs your pool, you're not going to be able to use those combos as fluently, especially when he starts piling on things like cheerful uppercuts and face shield blocks as well. The one thing that always really held this guy back, in my opinion, in the Crimson Rampage format was just the dominance of Momo. Momo is a character that this guy can just do almost nothing against. It's a really hard uphill matchup for him, and when that deck was just everything everywhere all at once, it was a really hard meta for Mineta to exist in. But I personally do not think that deck will be as omnipotent and omnipresent as it's been in the past at National. Mineta is just a very strong character flat out, and he's also someone that you need to have a plan against if he naturally counters you, and also be aware of how you play against as well. You can't run into him endlessly giving him free D builds and free value if you're not actually progressing the game state in your own way while you're doing it. Especially if you're playing those really blitz aggro decks like your Ochako 2s and your Tokoyamis, you really need to be aware of how you attack this guy, because the second you start swinging into him, he is going to start messing up your offensive strategy, and you can't just like monkey into him hardcore like you can against a lot of the other decks. His strong matchup into those really hard aggro characters that I think are going to dominate this entire tournament is mainly the reason why I put him so high on this list. I think he's a very good pick into the Tokoyamis of this world, and for that, Mineta 2 earnestly earns his second place spot on this list. But he is not quite first place. Meta just doesn't make it into that top spot. The top spot occupied by, of course, none other than Eraserhead himself. Every ounce of my bias is going to show through in this list because I think this guy is top dog right here. Jokes aside, I think Eraserhead is the best rogue deck that you can bring to the Pro Hero Nationals. Eraserhead 1 is just the complete embodiment of everything a rogue deck should be. It's got good matchups against the meta, it handles the off meta really well, it's got a plan, an answer, a tech for everything you can possibly imagine, and if you apply the maximum amount of perfect skill and play this guy to perfection all day, I don't think that there's a round you can lose. When you are playing this guy to maximum ability and maximum value, there are few games that are just ever going to be out of your control. Honestly, if we're going by like just sheer power level, I really think Eraserhead is in like the top 5 decks, but he's down here in the rogue category, albeit at the top of it, because of the main reason that has always held him back is he's just very, very hard to play. Coming from other card games, it really blew my mind when I saw that this guy was not played more often, because when I saw him get played perfectly, he just looked like the best deck in the world. And the answer that pretty much everyone had to that question was, well, by the time you're in round 7 on hour 8 or 9 of the day, you're not playing him like that anymore. And as someone who's now spent a lot of time with the character myself and played hundreds and hundreds of games with him, I absolutely have to agree. This is probably the hardest deck in the game to play. A lot of people have contested that it's either him or Momo. I think Momo is more about sequencing and organizing things, but Eraserhead is much more cutthroat decision making because you have to block everything so well, and the second you make a mistake, you just lose like half your life total and then everything goes awry. Fighting a really good Eraser player is most of the time just waiting for them to make some kind of mistake and give you some kind of opening to actually progress your game state against them. Otherwise, they're going to sit there and they're going to block everything all day. They're going to stop everything you're trying to do. They're going to shut down every move you're making until eventually they can just come back and blow you out with their own aggression. And if you're someone who's not taking Eraserhead and are more looking to prepare for playing against him, that's pretty much the best advice that I can give to you is play your deck to the best of your ability, understand what his blocking potential and aggressive potential on a backswing is, know when you can go into him, and look out for the second he gives you any kind of opening, because that is the one you have to take and try and seize to the fullest advantage so that you can take a victory against him. If you make the mistake of throwing 3 or 4 moves against this guy, not understanding that he is showing you on board and in hand that he can block everything, you're going to completely surrender the game state to him. Because more than likely, for the Eraserhead players themselves, they're going to be very, very skilled, they're going to be very, very experienced, they're going to know what they're doing, they're going to know what you're doing more than likely as well, and they're going to be very prepared for it. And if you're someone who's instead looking to play Eraser, the best advice I can give you, read the heck out of your opponent's cards and carry as much snacks and water on you all day as you can. Because the more you play this guy, the more you go through your day, the more tired you're going to get, the more fatigue is going to hit you, and you're not going to play this really, really, really high skill ceiling character at its maximum value, which is what you need to do all day to really secure that top spot. You've got to keep your eye drops on hand. You got to make sure you don't get your eyes all dry. That being said, if you can manage that across every round of the entire tournament day, I think this guy is the best deck on this list and probably the best deck in the game if you can maintain that output. And the ability to translate that skill set and game knowledge into such powerful gameplay lines is what really puts this character at the top spot on this list. And that, my dear viewers, is going to do it for this episode of the good, the bad, and the aggro. These 5 decks right here are your 5 best rogue decks to take the Pro Hero Nationals. And if you really want to catch people off guard, play some off-meta things, and have good matchups across the board, this is the squad for you. As always, guys, if you really liked the video, please head down to the comment section, leave me some feedback, and drop a like. Also, if you correctly guessed any of the characters that were going to be on this list, give yourself a pat in the back down there too while you're at it. On the previous video on the good, I asked people to kind of predict what guys might be in the following videos, and a bunch of you guys got these right. A ton of y'all were very on the nose, and I want y'all to do that for the next one as well. I want y'all to predict what you think the 5 decks on the list for the aggro will be in our next video coming later next week. Of course, if you reside on another end and you think there are other characters that should be on this list, I know all the Midnight fans are about to go crazy down there. If you think there are other characters that deserve to be on this list more, please let me know in the comments comments section below too. Above all else, if you're new here and you really enjoyed the video, if you really dug what you saw, go ahead and give the subscribe button a punch, because I'm putting out almost daily uploads. We're doing 6 days a week of MHA CCG content on Alliteration Gaming, whether it be gameplay, deck profiles, meta discussions like these. We do it all on this channel, and there's so many exciting things to come, especially as we enter probably the most hype era of the game, especially from a competing standpoint. This is probably the most exciting things have ever been, ever since today's like the first provisionals in Omaha. Nationals are a big deal, and I've got a ton of content that's going to be covering it and getting you ready for them, and of course going over everything post nationals as well. Also, we have the next and final installment of this mini series coming out soon, the aggro, and you know you can't miss that. You can't watch episodes 1, 2 and not 3. It's just not right. So if all of that sounds like something you want shoved into your newsfeed, hit the subscribe button to get access to all that. But that's all the time I've got for this video, guys. Thanks again so much for watching, and I hope I'll see y'all in the next one.